Greetings all. Thank you for joining me on the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast. I've always been fascinated by why and how people do what they do. This podcast is a way for me to put a spotlight on Africans in art, culture, media, design, and all the spaces in between, and chat to them about their journeys, perspectives, and the like. It's an extension of a book I wrote a few years ago called Listen to Your Footsteps, in which I reflect on my own journey, including fatherhood, identity, and life in general. I try to bring that to every conversation I have. Enjoy. This episode was recorded live at the first ever Advertising Week Africa, held in mid-January in Johannesburg. They'd partnered with American comedian Kevin Hart's media company, Heartbeat, and gave me the opportunity to chat to Olwethu Leshabane, CEO of Art of Superwoman, and someone who I've been wanting to chat to on the podcast for a while. Our conversation focused on the journey she has been on to build Art of Superwoman, which was important for me to delve into because the reality is that some of the challenges we have in terms of building media ecosystems in Africa are very different from those in the US and Europe. It was a very insightful chat with Olwethu, and what I also brought to it was the numerous conversations I had in between different sessions. When we were sitting at lunch and when we were sitting at breakfast, there were a lot of conversations because you had people from media, advertising, communications all in one room. And it was a great time to kind of reconnect with a lot of people that I've been engaging with over the years. Olwethu and I kind of brought that to the conversation, and that's what made it even richer. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. I heard him say, give a round of applause, right? So good afternoon. We don't have a lot of time, so just quick context. My name is Kojo Baffa. Don't worry about the job title or the company. I have many hats, and that was the one that felt like the most appropriate to pick for the stage. But what we're doing today is, so Listen to Your Footsteps is a book that I wrote a couple of years back, reflections on life and culture and parenthood and a whole bunch of other things. And I then started a podcast of the same name. In the podcast, I talk to Africans who are navigating the spaces of art, culture, design, literature, advertising, media, communications, etc. And today I am fortunate enough to have somebody I consider a friend, Olwethu Leshabane. She also has many titles, but the one we're working with is CEO of Art of Superwoman. And I won't do an introduction beyond that because that's going to be our conversation. And so thanks, Olwethu, for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Kojo.
So to start off with, something that's, and we chatted about it earlier, but something that's kind of cropped up quite a bit over the day is context. And one of my cheesy line is, everybody says context is king. I mean, content is king, but for me, context is everything. Content is just information. Without context, it's nothing.
Yeah.
And so with the discussions that have been happening today, with the thinking, there's been a kind of shift not a shift, but there's been a movement into a particular, let's say, zeitgeist in terms of thinking about Africa, in terms of thinking about how we tell our stories, etc. What was the seed that birthed Art of Superwoman?
I think it was... Hi everyone. I'm Olwethu, by the way. Let's start there. I think the seed that birthed Art of Superwoman was really trying to see how I wanted to fit into what's going on in the world and find out if there's anybody that kind of thought like me, resonated with my life experiences, and it came through blogging. So back then when Tumblr was a thing, I'd put out my thoughts. I'd be like, if Solange is blogging and she's on Tumblr and people are resonating, surely my crazy thoughts and the idea of my motherhood and my being a young mom, young wife, homemaker experience would resonate with somebody out there. And I put some stuff out there and people resonated. And I think it just grew from there. And it was, at first, you kind of think, I'm in this world alone and in isolation. And you realize that once you start articulating and having a language for your experience, somebody within your context will actually attach themselves to it and find their language in it too. And I think that's where it really came from.
So Tumblr seems like it's making a comeback with
is it?
with Elon Musk's Twitter. I'm finding a lot more people back on Tumblr.
Okay, I must jump back on.
It's a weird space now, but it would have been easy for you to occupy that space of, I guess, what they call influencer today. I mean, I'm a bit iffy about language and the word, but it would have been easy for you to focus just on yourself as an individual and, you know, continue to blog, continue to do campaigns on social media, etc. But you took it a step, you've taken it a step further. Why?
I think I looked around me and I looked at the context of what we're going through as women. At that time, I was a young career woman, mother, homemaker, and I still wanted to live a certain lifestyle. I still wanted certain things. I wasn't going to be that mom who gives birth, sits at home for 6 months, and doesn't have a career. I wanted a career. I wanted financial freedom. I wanted a particular lifestyle, and I like things. And so I wanted to put it out there, and I wanted to also find these things that I like and create and kind of curate my lifestyle to the way that I wanted it to be. And so it started shifting away from, because people resonated with it and there was an audience for it, it shifted away from trying to find people that were like-minded because they were there. And it moved towards, how do I then create a platform that allows the people that are there and the community that now exists to be able to jump onto the bandwagon and be with me in all this stuff, and we all have fun together. And that's where Art of Superwoman, the actual platform, when I registered the domain, came from. And how it then grew was people like Kojo, and other platforms as Kai FM, Power FM, etc., that would then give me a call and say, we actually just found out about your platform. We'd like to cover this topic on radio. We'd actually like to cover this particular content piece that you put out on your platform on radio or TV. Would you please be our guest on the show? And that's where then I found the platform kind of springboarded from. And drawing from that inspiration, I was like, if they're doing it on their platforms, why can't I take this content and actually create a kind of a 360 media platform that not only is a blog platform and a website, but I can actually do my own video content. I can actually do my own podcast content. So it's podcast, video, blog content. And yeah, we do the full media offering on our platform.
What has been the shift for you mentally? And I ask this because, so it's easy for me, right? I've worked in the media, I write, it's a space that fascinates me. So I consult for brands, I consult for people. And one of my causes has always been this idea of, you know, it started off as business as publisher, because as magazine, radio, etc. were trying to figure out, being disrupted and trying to figure out what they were, brands and companies can now take ownership of their narrative, right? And become publishers to a certain extent. Then what's happened as a shift is in the last couple of years where media ecosystems are being built around individuals. So it's easy for me to see it, right? Because that's my space. But you not coming from that space and literally just looking at, okay, I want to be able to share this with like-minded people to get into the point where you actually have to create that community.
Yeah.
And you have to think about it very differently from how you were doing stories, you're doing blog posts, etc. as an individual. What has that shift been like?
So I think, a lot of brands, and this is not brand bashing, but a lot of brands are very sentimental about their brands and what they're trying to sell and what they want to put out there, right? And so they attach themselves to certain people. So it's what Kevin Hart was talking about earlier. The values of a brand kind of match up with what they're seeing in you, and they want to get married to you. And you're like, but I come with a whole community. You know, the reason why you want to work with me is because I come with the community. There's the data, there's the analytics to show for it. So I've created Art of Superwoman, which is the community. How about I take you with me to Art of Superwoman? And we create more magic together, and we create more content that actually is within the context of what we like as this community of women, because there's a lot of brands just kind of look at the one aspect of you. Oh, we as a brand want to work with you because you're a mom, and they don't understand sometimes the context that we have within the community of Art of Superwoman, where it's not just moms that kind of like what you have, but there's a potential mom in the next 2 or 3 years that is an Art of Superwoman consumer, or an Art of Superwoman community member. There's somebody who's a mom, a careerist, who loves things as well, and loves their lifestyle, and makes certain lifestyle decisions and makes certain purchase decisions that could be part of the Art of Superwoman community. But because you're only restricting women to a certain idea and a certain model, you're losing out on so much more. And that's what Art of Superwoman kind of drives, wants to drive the narrative towards. Not boxing what women are. We're so multifaceted. We're so many other things beyond just birthers. We're so many other things beyond just, you know, careerists only. We can be expansive. We can do so many things. We can do it all. Sometimes not all at once, sometimes all at once, but we can do it all.
I think, for me, an important word is nuance. What I find is that within, let's call it our market, within our environment, because of the history of this country, there is, for example, I used to say when I was in magazine that it really felt like when you're dealing with the Black audience, Black communities, there's no nuance. It's homogenous. And what you're describing as a woman is you're nuanced. There's so many different dimensions to who you are. And it's having spaces that, it's having communities where you can manifest that, which it feels like Art of Superwoman is. But it's also for brands to understand that if you're going to engage with this community, you can't come with a single-minded approach to it. You have to recognize that there is nuance to this.
Absolutely.
And there are multiple dimensions. And I mean, having followed you over the years and interacted with you over the years, like you're saying, you can be you're a career person, you're building this platform, you're a mother, you're a wife. And it shouldn't be the case, but one of the interesting narratives around you is how Neo, your husband, is supporting you, and it's spoken about as a rarity when it shouldn't be. Does that come up? I mean, how does that come up? And Neo's sitting in the front row, so I'm not going to look at him, but I'm going to let you speak for him slightly. It must have made for an interesting transition. Because, you know, relationships are unique. Every single relationship is unique because you have two unique individuals in a relationship together. But it must have been an interesting conversation. It must have been an interesting transition where it's like, okay, you are the person you're building this platform. And to a certain extent, which women have done unfortunately for centuries, what he wants to do is subordinate to what you're building. Is that the case? And what was that conversation, that transition like?
I always say, and I still maintain, my husband is the best CA in the country. I mean, there's no greater mind than his. And so I'd always be picking his brain on a lot of the strategies that I wanted to implement and the way I wanted to move. Because what I knew is where I wanted to go. And sometimes you know you are here and you want to get there. But, you know, there's a certain way you must move. And as a creative, you kind of think in small incremental steps. Let me just do the next and then I'll do the next. But you need that structured mind who's going to help you grow, who's going to help you build, and who's going to help you put the building blocks and the numbers behind some of the moves you're going to make. So I'd always be picking his mind. I mean, this is pre-COVID. I'd be picking his mind. And there's that bedroom talk that you have on like, how about this? This is what I'm thinking of doing. And so COVID hits and, you know, so my husband's a deal maker. So COVID hits, his deals are on pause. And he comes into my office at the time and he says, you seem to be busy. What are you up to? And I mean, this is a time when business is doing well for me. Digital strategies are on the rise. I'm helping a lot of other companies kind of, you know, transform their everyday communications internally and externally into how do they communicate with the everyday person now that they're not able to have contact with them. And you know, Art of Superwoman is also being commissioned to do a lot of work, of culture work, for a lot of women within corporate organizations. How do women then strike that balance? Because a lot of women are doing the 4 C's: cooking, cleaning, caring, and careers. We're in the pandemic, and I think the stats are still over 63% of women. Is it still? Yes, over 63% of women in this country are woman-headed households, and there's no fathers on birth certificates. So you're sitting with these numbers, you're sitting with this workforce that is struggling. And so you have an Art of Superwoman that's able to know how to communicate with women, know how to have these conversations with women. But now, how do I make the numbers number? How do I make the strategy? And so in comes my husband and he says, well, how about we do this? Let me give you 5 years of my life. Let me put aside my work and let me give you 5 years of my life and dedicate myself to operations for building this thing and building this media business. And needless to say, I mean, we've grown in leaps and bounds from then, from beginning of the pandemic till now. And we've done some amazing work along some incredible brands. And one of the latest ones was going around the country and profiling some women who are in leadership roles, that are mothers, that are careerists, some of the top careerists, who live some of the most amazing lives, and driving around the country in an Isuzu and just profiling them, and going on adventures with them, because we also love adventure. We like things. We like flying out of planes. I flew out of a plane with Leroy, who just executive produced Dr. Kumalo's documentary. We parachuted and we had a conversation around building the business and producing big documentaries. And so that was really kind of the mission. And with Neo at the helm of operations, we've been able to not only say we're doing the work and we're creatively just far ahead of the curve, but we're also, the numbers are numbering too, and the operations are still in motion.
This is the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast, a journey into the life and perspectives of Africans living on their own terms. I also have an email newsletter, a book, and even music playlist available on my site, kojobaffa.com. Let's get back to the conversation. What's the balance between, for example, projects, editorial projects that you'll get involved in where it's responding to a client's need, versus your own kind of projects and features and segments of the site?
So I say no to a lot because it needs to make sense to our values of being able to, for content that's firstly driving commerce, and second, our other values, which is all about ensuring that we are serving our audience with exactly what they need and they want within the context of South Africa as well. So we constantly try and marry what the client wants and what their output needs to be, because our content needs to drive their commerce. And then we also are looking for the kind of content that we produce to be able to give every single woman that's consuming our content exactly what they're looking for out there and what the gaps are in the content that is put out for us. We watch so many shows where we're misrepresented. We watch so many talk shows where it's all about the sensationalization of the issues we go through, instead of actually serving a purpose and answering some of our calls of what you know, how do I make sure my career moves make sense? How do I make sure that my lifestyle makes sense? How do I make sure that my health and wellness is also taken into consideration as I'm climbing up the corporate ladder? At what point is it okay to say no? At what point is it okay to say, listen, parenting is not it right now, and I've got a place to lean into? And, you know, there's also women that say, I'm a parent, but I don't think I'm fit for this. You know, the kind of content that we put out is a lot of parents who have children, but we're co-parenting with our parents because I'm not cut out for this. Or you're co-parenting with your family members and I'm not cut out for this. And so we're so considerate of how multifaceted and multidimensional we are as women, and that we don't get boxed to this idea of you graduate or you come out of school and you focus on your career and then you get married and then you have babies and then you kind of have to figure things out and kind of strike this balance. That's really not who we are.
And I guess it's also approaching it without judgment.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes we have these conversations, sometimes they're uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
But judgment tends to be kind of the underlying tone.
Yes.
When we engage in
self-judgment too.
Yeah.
Self-judgment more often than it is other people judging us. So when we work with these brands, we make them understand that's who you are talking to. That's the kind of people you are talking to. And if you're not meeting us there, then what is the purpose of what we're trying to achieve?
So what are the different components to Art of Superwoman in terms of as a business, in terms of whether it's divisions or platforms and mediums?
So the platforms, like I mentioned earlier, it's podcast, it's video. So we have a podcast platform, we have video that we serve on the platform, we have blog, we have events. So one thing that we've also stepped into as of last year, we look for events to partner with because, so I'll give you an example. We partnered with a chef Mole, and she does seasonal events where she does cooking events. And we're like, our audience would love that. Some of us don't know how to cook well. But some of us don't know how to cook. And
the underlying judgment I talked about just 20 seconds ago.
But like some of us don't know how, and we maybe aspire to actually have either a good vibe where we're all cooking and drinking some bubbly together, or we actually want to learn the skill of cooking, or we just want to be with other women and meet new friends and make new acquaintances. So we find all these events that are happening or things that are happening. We bring brand partners along with us that we have as either Olwethu or as Art of Superwoman. And we say, come along with us. Let's partner in doing this and let's create platforms for women. And so it then starts becoming we're also doing events, and we're also stepping into other communities as well, and building other communities outside of just this. I know a lot of the time I'm perceived as this motherhood, blogger, and it's not necessarily that. Sometimes I'm not a mom. Sometimes I'm partying up a storm at Nostra with my friends too.
I mean, I was going to ask, where does reality TV fit into all of these? Like Real Housewives and stuff.
So how that came about, I mean, I can only answer it by telling you how that came about. So prior to falling, actually, I was already pregnant, I think I was already pregnant. I think it was in early stages of my pregnancy with my third child. I get a call from Sonia, and she says, hi Olwethu, we're working on this. Can you please jump on board? I was like, listen, I'll help you with the pilot. But I'm really not about that vibe. So I help her with the pilot, and we kind of do the pilot because I'm also very curious and I like things. But now, I mean, I'm in early stages of my pregnancy, and I'm not just about to get onto a reality show whilst pregnant. And they start filming, and she's like, hey, we want you on board. And I was like, Sonia, I'm not sure that I really want to do this thing. The situation is that I am pregnant, and I know how these things work out. It might not be something that's up my alley. Did the girl not wait for me to pop? And she's like, so since you're not pregnant anymore, how about we're midway through the season? Can you please jump in? So, my husband is actually in the car with me as this call is happening. And he's like, we're on the way to your offices. And we drove to Sonia's offices. And my husband was like, why not? Just do it. And I was like, but like, there's going to be such a big expectation for me to portray a certain part of me that is so not me on a reality show like this. Do you understand what Real Housewives is about? He's like, I don't really watch this thing. I don't know what it's about, but I can tell you you'll do great. You always authentically yourself. And if you remain yourself and you're just yourself throughout it all, you'll be okay. And needless to say, I mean, I think it kind of worked out outside of being dragged for a couple of months. But it kind of worked out until the pandemic hit. And everybody was like, this girl had been seeing the sanitizer thing.
Yeah, actually, that's true, no? You got a sanitizer fixation.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, everybody's got a sanitizer fixation now.
Actually, sadly not. If you go around in the world, it's like people have so forgotten. And men are the worst, but I won't even get into that. So how do you, I mean, I'm going to ask a question that I know is the worst question, because women are always asked this question and men are never asked this question. You have 3 boys who are growing and exuberant and full of life. And you have a husband who, yes, he may support you when it comes to the numbers, but he's the 4th male in the equation. And when I phoned you last week, you were in Durban or something. I'm like, can I talk to you tomorrow? And you're like, I'm in Cape Town. And so how do you kind of find that balance between all of these things? But the more important thing for me is that in terms of balance, in terms of yourself and your psyche and being good and having the energy to navigate it.
There is no balance. I don't find the balance. I think I delegate a lot. I am a self, I will confess, I am a delegator of note. I think I've just honed and I'm still working on it, but I've honed in on my ability to also know when to let go. Like if I'm not with the kids, it shouldn't be my stress at that point in time. I need to just stay present where I am. And that comes with being able to delegate. We've got an amazing nanny who I delegate that portion to. She looks after them when we're not there. When my husband is at home, he's doing the parenting. When I'm not in the office, we've got somebody who's in the office who I delegate things that I need to be doing to. I've got Tembi, who I delegate a lot of our media, our social media and our content to. So I delegate, and I can't be everywhere. I can't do it all at once. I can't, be thinking about what my kids are eating when I'm not there. I need to know that I've done well in delegating it and equipping somebody else to be able to handle that, and being able to have given the next person the tools and the trust that I trust them to look after whatever I've delegated to them and take a step back. And I think a lot more women need to practice that in their everyday life, that we can't, balance is only, your idea of balance is not going to be the same thing as somebody else's idea of balance. But if you've given somebody something to do and you've trusted them with the ability to do it, trust them enough to also know that when they do drop the ball, yeah, I mean, we all mess up and we all drop the ball, but you've trusted them enough to have given it to them, hands off, and let them see it through.
No, I think, it's a lesson for all of us, because if you're going to build anything, and I think it's a struggle that many of us have, is that transition from thinking about something centered around you to creating some kind of foundation behind it. And to create a foundation, you need a team of sorts, and you need to also be able to. So, being able to delegate is actually a superpower, because most of us don't know how to do it. And I have a virtual assistant, and it's been a year and a half, and I still don't know how to go, you handle all of this. So I still find myself putting my fingers in everything.
I think all of us do. I think we all. Also, when you still delegate, you still want to be able to have your pulse on everything, and I still struggle with that a lot. I'm I love overlooking my content, and I love overlooking the nitty-gritties of things. And I'm slowly learning to take my hands off things and allowing things to happen, and allowing balls to be dropped, and allowing a lot of mess ups. I put up a post at the end of last year and just reflecting on my year. Because I was practicing the art of delegating with so much intention last year, we fucked up a lot. I had to also learn that it's part of the process. We really messed up. We really dropped the ball on a lot of things. We really kind of messed up with a few clients, but it's part of the process. It's part of the learning process. Now I know what to do and where to hone in better. I know what skills to harness in the people around me. I also know what to let go of more.
I think we're reaching the end of our time. I think it's flashing in front of us. I feel privileged to have been able to watch this journey and continue to watch the journey. And I bring it back to the idea of context, because, so for example, when Kevin Hart was speaking, and I mean, he's created something amazing, but we are surrounded by people who are doing the same thing. It's just perhaps not on the same scale, and it's within our particular context. And I think it's always important for us to remember that, and it's always important for us to acknowledge that, you know, people like you are out there creating these things, and we will mess up and we will stumble. And in reality, that's the only way we'll get better at stuff. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Koja.
Cool. Thank you for listening to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast. I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe and/or leave a comment wherever it is you're listening. To access the book, there are links on the website www.kojabaffa.com. If you're interested, there's also a curated email newsletter that I put out fortnightly to monthly. You can subscribe at zebraculture.substack.com. I hope you enjoyed listening and walk away with something that makes your world a little bit easier.